What is an example of pure evil? Child sex trafficking. It literally ruins these innocent children's lives before they can do anything about it. Disgusting. I want to say money makes people do abominable things, but it's somehow more than that. If you really wanted money, surely there are ways you can get it, even illegally, that is much less evil than this. Chris Watts. Colorado father who strangled his 34-year-old pregnant wife, then killed his 3- and 4-year-old daughters and dumped their bodies in oil tanks. He did this to get rid of obstacles that prevented him from being with his lover. Edit, thanks for all the upvotes and comments. I had no idea there was a Netflix documentary and YouTube videos on this case. I don't think I have the stomach to watch those. I just remember watching the news coverage at the time and feeling sick to my stomach for those poor little girls and their pregnant mother. There's a lot of evil in the world, but it's one of the ones I can't forget. Apparently, lots of women have been sending him love letters to the prison because of how hot he is after he went viral by the Netflix documentary. They are sick in the head too. This is unfortunately common and nothing new. Even Bundy had women pining for him. It's insane. Some guy in the 80s who worked in a lab injected his infant son with HIV-infected blood so his son would die, a horrible death, and he wouldn't have to pay child support. Edit, 1992, not 80s. Joseph Fritzl, based in Amstetten, Austria, held his daughter captive for 24 years. During this time he assaulted her, sexually abused and raped her numerous times during her imprisonment inside a concealed area in the cellar of the family home. The abuse resulted in 7 children, 3 remained in captivity with their mother, 1 died shortly after birth and the other 3 raised by him and his wife Rosemarie. That one story of those Yakuza boys torturing that one girl. Junko. Something. I'll have to look it up later, but the details are honestly gut-wrenching. Edit, the name is Junko Furuta. Meant no disrespect by not remembering, just genuinely forgot with all the other stories I've read. Just goes to show you how much ducked up shit is really out there. If I remember the story you're talking about, I don't think they were actually Yakuza, one of them just claimed to be. But yes, they tortured, raped, and eventually murdered a 17-year-old girl, and one of the guy's parents were aware of it. They were actually keeping her hostage in the house. This happened for weeks, months, but no one stepped in. Truly ducking gruesome. And the mom of one of those assholes recently vandalized her grave for ruining her son's life. Ducking what? Edit, and the real fucked up part? This was after her son was released from a 7-year stint of nearly beating a man to death, where he allegedly said "I've killed before and know how to get away with it." I hope she escorts them to hell and haunts them until then. Unit 731, a secret biological and chemical warfare research unit of the Imperial Japanese Army that undertook lethal human experimentation during World War II. Some particularly brutal experiments performed on prisoners included frostbite testing, intentional syphilis infection, live target weapon testing, forced pregnancy from rape, bacteriological experiments on children, vivisection, surgery conducted for experimental purposes on a living organism, in this case, without anesthesia. Read here for anyone with the will to listen to such atrocities. I recommend Jocko Podcast number 133, The Horrors of Unit 731. Edit, a few people below have mentioned a movie based on Unit 731 called Men Behind the Sun. Edit, definition of vivisection. Lawrence Singleton. What he did to 15-year-old Mary Vincent is one of the most ducked up things I've ever heard. He picked her up as she was hitchhiking. When he pulled over to pee, she got out of the van to tie her shoelaces. He whacked her over the head with a shovel. Put her into the back of the van, raped her all night, then cut off both of her arms and threw her off a cliff, 30 feet drop, and drove off. Despite this, she survived. 15-year-old Mary Vincent managed to climb back up the cliff and started walking. Eventually, a couple on their honeymoon drove past her and rescued her. This isn't even the tip of the iceberg with Larry Singleton. The podcast My Favorite Murder did a brilliant episode on him. He was a cruel bastard, and I'm happy he died of brain cancer. Wait, how do you climb up a cliff if you have no arms? She packed mud in her stumps to stop the bleeding. When she finally made it to the road, and a car passed, after she walked miles, they sped away. Finally, a couple on their honeymoon saw her and immediately rushed her to get help and saved her life. Mary Vincent is one badass woman. The medical experiments done in concentration camps during World War II. That's Sylvia Likens' story. I honestly felt like less of a human after reading it. I never thought a Wikipedia article could make me cry so damn hard, but it was like every line just kept getting worse. n.wikipedia.org. People who torture animals to make videos and people who get off on that. Crystal Scott, 19, of Kokomo was the bitch who was arrested in 2020 for distributing animal-crushing videos. KokomoTribune.com. What's really bad is the fake animal rescue videos where they hurt the animal and trap it under some rocks and then they turn the camera on and act like they just found the animal and are rescuing it. The murder of Junko Furuta. Sick pieces of shit. They're still roaming free to this day. Search at your own risk, it's absolutely horrific. Ogura's mother allegedly vandalized Furuta's grave, stating that she had ruined her son's life. I can't get over the fact that I read this. Ogura raped and tortured that girl for over a month until she died. Holy shit, imagine being this ducking disgusting that you vandalize a murdered girl's grave that your son killed because her death caused her son's life to be ruined. He deserved to have his life ruined, and even if he didn't, you don't fucking vandalize a dead girl. Considering my own family turned on me when I went to the police about my grandfather molesting me at 10, am not surprised in the least. My own great-grandmother cut off all contact with me and I found out only after she died that she'd apparently spent the rest of her life insisting I had lied about the molestation to ruin her son's life, even though he'd also been caught raping his own 6-year-old daughter, my mother, for years. So it's not like this came as a surprise to her or anything. Nanjing Massacre, aka the Rape of Nanjing. One of the witnesses, a reverend, estimated that there were 1,000 rapes every night. Tens of thousands of people were murdered. Absolutely horrible. You can read more about it here, but, yeah, it's bad. The worst part is that it wasn't just regular raping. They would literally force sons to rape their mothers, as well as fathers to their daughters. The people who pressured a 14-year-old Japanese teen to kill herself on stream. Skinning animals alive. The Toy Box Killer. Truly the sickest, most horrifyingly disgusting example of humanity. The monologue, which you can find through a Google search, that he would play for his new victims is probably the scariest thing on earth. John Venables and Robert Thompson. When they were 10, they abducted 2-year-old James Bulger from a shopping center, took him to some railway tracks, tortured and abused him for hours, then left his body to get cut in half by an oncoming train. Edit, thank you kind Redditors for the awards. It's a sad topic but important to make young children aware of the dangers they can face, even in other children. This was my comment, but my brain had blocked out that poor boy's name. Child molestation and severe physical torture used solely for emotional pleasure. Torturing helpless animals, children, and/or the elderly. There is a special place in hell for these kinds of people. Taking advantage of the innocent and weak, children and animals. Oscar Dierlevanger. A Nazi so evil even the Nazis thought he went too far. Look up some of the atrocities he committed during World War II, specifically the Warsaw Uprising. Basically a sadist alcoholic pedo unleashed in a war without rules. Edit, just one excerpt from Wikipedia. In the summer of 1944, Dierlevanger led his butchers, rapists and looters into action against the Warsaw Uprising, and quickly committed unspeakable crimes. In Warsaw, Dierlevanger participated in the Wola massacre, together with police units rounding up and shooting some 40,000 civilians, most of them in just 2 days. In the same Wola district, Dierlevanger burned 3 hospitals with patients inside, while the nurses were whipped, gang raped and finally hanged naked, together with the doctors to the accompaniment of the popular song in München ein Hofbrauhaus. I really wonder how many of his ilk has had free rein in service of their armed forces over the centuries. Like the cousin of Richard Ramirez sharing stories and pictures of prolific rape, terror, murder when he was a Green Beret in Vietnam. In Oliver Stone's memoir, he writes about some other soldiers in his platoon turning against him because he stopped them from gang raping a village girl in Vietnam. Murder of Kelly Ann Bates. I won't go into the details as it is very gruesome, but know that some consider her to be the most tortured victim. Her boyfriend tortured her over a period of 4+ weeks. n.m.wikipedia.org. Warning, not for the faint of heart. Wow, that's horrific, that poor girl. I'm a student in social anthropology and one of my teachers studies sexual violence on men in war times, in particular during the breakup of Yugoslavia. Here is one small example of the kind of shit she saw. A young boy, like 12 or 13, was at home with his 2 parents when a bunch of armed soldiers broke in. They threatened the mother with a gun and made a proposition to the kid. Sodomize your father and we will let your parents live. To save his mom and dad, the young boy complied. But when he had finished raping his own father, the soldiers killed both of his parents, gave him a bunch of drugs, a gun, and made him a child soldier fighting for their side. I always thought if they didn't commit the act their parents would die. I never even thought it knew that even complying with the demands leads to the same outcome. Those poor children, no wonder drugs become something they would rely on. This is a ducked up world. Honestly, the quote, all that evil need to persist is for good men to do nothing, is as true as they come.